Excel has a number of error-checking functions. However, they're strangely organized. If you go to the Formulas tab in the ribbon and choose More Functions, you will see in the Information category functions such as is error, and is logical, is non-text, quite a few here relating to error checking. But you'll also find them in the category called logical. There's an if error and a new function called if NA. We don't always need these, but in some situations, it's an ideal way to check errors and to display different information. In this worksheet here, where we're tabulating sales and expenses, and then quite a few variations on different statistics based on those, look what happens if we have a month where the sales and expenses are the same. I'm going to change this to 240. The profits are 0, and then we've got a calculation in row 9, and potentially others too, that are coming up with this error of division by 0. And that's exactly what this formula is trying to do. And that's a distinct error. And we certainly don't want this to be displayed here. We don't want to have to explain it. We might want to display nothing or display NA. And so one approach to this is to do the following. I'm going to make the column wider so we can see the function, and then double click in here and introduce the function is error. Now this is usually found within an if function. We're going to check to see if this calculation, it creates an error. So is error, left parenthesis, then a right parenthesis. If this formula is going to create an error, comma, we want to display something different. If it's simply empty, we'll put in double quote, double quote. If we want to display NA, we can put that in there. Any number of different things we might want to put in there. But this is what we want to have appear in the cell when that calculation causes an error. If it doesn't, comma, what is it we want to do? The actual calculation. So let's just highlight that and press Control C and put it out here. Control V, then a final parenthesis. So it's a bit lengthy here, but once again, it's saying if this calculation will cause an error, display NA. If it doesn't, perform the calculation. So as we press Enter here, we should see NA. Now, I'm going to leave this here, but put a space in front of it for display purposes, and compare this approach with a newer version, first available in Excel 2007, a new function called if error. And before I do that, I'm going back into here to copy this formula again with Control C, then Escape. So, equal if error. This is going to be much shorter. What is it that we're checking to see is an error? This formula that I just copied, I'll paste it in. When that is an error, we want to display, just like we did before, double quote NA. But when it's not, we don't have to say anything. This calculation will be performed. We put in the right parenthesis, we will get the same answer we got before. Let me redisplay it with a leading space so we can see this side by side. It's pretty apparent that these two functions are quite a bit different in length, and the second one is much easier to read, so we don't have to repeat the formula in there twice. So that's quite an improvement, and it does solve our need here of displaying information instead of displaying a division by 0 error. You can also put in NA in a different way. You can put it in as a function, and a lot of times it doesn't make any difference, but let's say we go back to this version here. If you want to display this as an actual function, you type NA, left parenthesis, right parenthesis, and it gets displayed this way. A different look for sure, and you might or might not prefer it. But it has another advantage, which we'll show in a second. And it also would work here, of course, same general idea. So right here, if we want to display that as a function, we type NA, left parenthesis, right parenthesis, and get the same kind of an answer. The reason we bring this up is that there is a function called, and we're testing it right here. Here's, first of all, is a VLOOKUP that isn't working, isn't giving us the word sale. It can't find it. So we end up with an NA. And here's a function. Here's the use of the if function along with a function called isNA. Is that an NA? It surely is. Therefore, we put in fail. Now that too has a new function. It's analogous to our is error and if error, and it's called if NA. So let me leave this here again with a leading space so we can see it, and possibly just copy this downward and then make some changes. And we'll, for the moment, get rid of the leading space. And the new function is if NA. If that cell is causing an error, let's display fail. Otherwise, let's display nothing. So that's a bit shorter, not nearly as short as our other comparison. Now, there's one other bit of confusion as we use some of these functions. Suppose we're checking to see if this cell is in error. One way to do this is use that older function. I say older in the sense that it's been around in Excel longer. We want to check to see if this is an error. Is error. There is another function called ISERR, and the only difference in the two is that isError checks for all error conditions. Is this an error? It surely is. So what are we going to display here? Anything we want, but let's say not found. Otherwise, it's okay, like we found it. IsError, and that's what we get. The function ISERR doesn't have the OR portion in it, checks for all error conditions except for NA-type errors. So this time we're going to get the answer OK. So, as we've seen here in prior examples in this movie, there are quite a few different techniques for checking for errors using these functions. And remember, you'll find some of them, if you're doing research on them or trying to look for them, on the Formulas tab by way of the information functions, and you'll find others under logical functions.